Hello, Digger, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. We have a very controversial and interesting, thought-provoking deep dive today with Dr. Jeremy Ayres. He's going to say some things that I think are going to shake up some belief systems. I think some of his topics are so controversial that some people may find themselves upset or may find themselves deciding to question their own belief system and go deeper. I just want to say that anything that he says that it goes completely against your current knowledge or belief system, approach it with an open mind. Ask yourself, am I upset because it's challenging my dogma, or am I upset because I think it's hurtful, or am I upset because I've never heard this before, and it's completely opposite to what everyone around me believes, right? So we just kind of have to question our own belief system. I am not saying that I believe everything he says. I am saying that it's worth having thought exercises. I believe it's a part of personal growth to listen to an opinion different from yours and to just keep your mind open and then go deeper and see, well, what evidence is there for that? And is it true? Is this the truth? Can I find evidence to support this? And why does he say these things? He does actually have a lot more information. He says some things and then doesn't provide deep, we didn't go super deep on some things he says. And I'd love to have him back and have him explain why he said the things he said. Although there's his books that you can dive into. There's plenty of videos of him online and articles, and he's been a doctor for many years, and he doesn't say anything without a basis. He doesn't just state something that's an opinion he's decided. He comes to conclusions based on enough evidence, and you can find the same evidence that he has found, and I'm sure you can reach out to him as well, and he would provide you with that evidence. So this is a wonderful exercise to challenge our belief system. I've had my belief system changed doing this podcast the last 8 years, and it has really enriched my life. I've allowed old beliefs to be shed away in light of new evidence and new information, and I find that actually builds us up. So I hope this information builds you up. I hope the information exposes you to ideas that empower you and that give you a path to building yourself up. I want to let you know that if you're new to seeking true health, that I have published a book I'd love for you to do. It's called Addicted to Wellness. It's a workbook, so it's where rubber meets the road, and it provides you with the foundations of health in a way that is fun and doable, even for the busiest of people. Please check it out. You can go to learntruehealth.com/addicted to wellness or type in Addicted to Wellness by Ashley James in Amazon. Thank you so much for sharing this podcast with those you care about. I have a feeling this is one of those very shareable episodes because we're going to start to think about friends and family and colleagues that need to hear this information, especially those who have been lied to by their doctors. And the doctors don't even know they're lying. Again, this is what we're going to be talking about today. But if you have a friend or family member who's sick, who's suffering, who's sick of suffering, who just doesn't want to suffer anymore, but they're on multiple medications, and the medications are making it even worse, not better, and they're not getting to the root cause, and their doctor's not helping them heal themselves, this is going to be a wonderful introduction to why it is the way it is, and that there is a different way, and how we can guide people there. I encourage you to check out my book because there's a lot of evidence-based, actionable steps to building our health up, and I'd love for you to have those tools in your tool belt. learntruehealth.com/addicted to wellness is the book. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 526. I am so excited for today's guest. We have on the show with us Dr. Jeremy Ayres. Naturallybetterforyou.com is his website, spelt anyway. That's really smart. Naturallybetterforyou.com. Dr. Ayres is an osteopathic physician who combines the best of naturopathic, chiropractic, and osteopathic care. He's famous for the book he co-authored, The Red Pill Revolution, where he uncovers it's criminal how the medical industry has and the food industry has taken us prisoner. And it's like the Matrix, right? You can't see the Matrix, but you're a prisoner of the Matrix. And this is where we live. We live in a world where our health is controlled by major corporations who profit from us being sick. And of course, if you're listening to this, you are interested in stepping outside of the mainstream to look for how to achieve true health. And I know with our guest today, this is a missing piece that has been missing for you and for all of us. Dr. Ayres is going to fill us in on what we need to know in order to help our body's ability to heal itself. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for finally getting me on here, because we've had some technical issues a few times, but we're here now.
Yes, I'm very happy to have you on. We have been trying to get this interview for a while, and today we did it. I'm so committed to getting this information out there. I've been screaming from the rooftops for years. And then I come across your message, and it was so refreshing to see another person saying almost the exact same thing I've been saying. But you also have been in the trenches as a doctor. And so you have a unique perspective. I've interviewed over 500 doctors the last 8 years, and many of them are actually medical doctors, MDs. And I was always surprised, what does it take for an MD to wake up, reject the system that they spent over $500,000 investing in their education, and then move towards holistic plant-based or, herbal-based medicine, functional medicine, and almost reject the drug-based medical industry. And so often I'll ask them, what happened in your life? And every single one of them said, I got sick, or my wife or my dad or someone in their life, either themselves personally or someone that they dearly loved, and they realized that allopathic, drug-based, pharmaceutical-based medical doctor system had zero answers to helping support the body's ability to heal itself, had zero capacity to reverse disease and get someone out of a disease state and living their optimal life, optimally healthy. And that's when they went, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been lied to, because they all said the same thing. They said, we're taught throughout our school, many, many years of medical school, that we're taught all the answers, and if it's not taught in medical school, it's not even worth knowing. And what a bunch of lies and manipulation that there's so many doctors out there that their heart's in the right place, but they've been brainwashed by the medical industry. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today, because I want to go deeper and have people understand the history of the modern medical system, that it's only about 130 or less years. It hasn't been around that long when we look at how we think it's always been this way. We're born into this system. It hasn't always been this way. And we have to understand that we have been lied to since birth. So I'm very excited to go down that rabbit hole with you. And then we're going to talk about the problem, unpack that problem. And then we want to talk, of course, about the solution, which you have a wonderful solution.
Where to begin with all that, because what you've said is profoundly right. And, probably most of your audience is aware that you are profoundly right. But if there's anyone listening for the first time by chance and just listened to you and thought, what a wacko, let's start there. I'm 55 years young, and I didn't one day wake up and decide to pick every controversial subject and do the opposite to what everybody else has been told or thought was correct and right, so that it would make me more money and win me more popularity and friends. Because as you know, the opposite is true. I could have made myself a great fortune if I'd have gone a different route, for example. So there is a reason why doctors like myself have chosen this path, which has been bumpy and arduous and challenging at times. And the bottom line to that is, I was brought up by a wonderful mother who passed last year, accelerated by certain medical interventions that has happened in the last few years. Maybe we can touch on that. But nonetheless, I was brought up by a wonderful woman, a very simple woman in many ways, and she hated bullies and liars. And I didn't realize she was prepping me for my adult life, and certainly she didn't either, but prepping me for my adult life when I realized that the system per se is the bullies and liars. I was brought up like most of you, educated, or so-called educated, believing, that the politicians, what they're saying were true, and, how things were run, and that doctors were there to help you, and so forth. And at 12 years old, cancer came to our family for the first time. And it was my brother's wife's mother had breast cancer, and she went on to pass with that. Now, at the time, I was told that she died from breast cancer, and I probably think my brother and his wife would still say that. But what I saw was the fear, and as a 12-year-old boy, the fear and the grief and the upset and the anger, and how it caused problems with relationships as her mother went through what she did and then finally passed. And at 12 years old, I remember thinking, this is just wrong. So something's got to be done about this. This is terrible. And then I went off on my merry way, growing up until I was about 21, 22, where I was an Olympic. I represented Great Britain in canoeing in the Olympic training squad. And I hurt my back very badly. And I've never liked doctors. I don't know what it was. I just didn't feel comfortable ever going to a doctor, talking to a doctor, being in a doctor's office. Excuse me. And so I hurt my back very badly. It was the Olympic year. And there was this portly chap, looked more like a British butcher than an osteopath or a healthcare professional. And he was an osteopath, and I didn't know what the hell that was at the time. But he wasn't charging very much. And he said, well, I can help you. Come along to my clinic. And so off I went. Well, struggled to get in my car and drive there. I could hardly walk. And he had a sort of production line clinic, which was lots of booths separated by curtains and lots of student osteopaths. And it was a bit like a commercial factory, really. But nonetheless, I came into there, and he asked me to take my clothes off down to my boxers, and I wasn't ready for that one. Examined me, and then handed me over to an Eastern European woman with more muscles and facial hair than me at the time, who then proceeded to massage me into near tears. And of course, I'm English, so we don't complain. We construct a carefully written letter the next day, rather than like Americans or Canadians who might speak up, So there I am laying, crying, thinking, when will this torturous thing end? And then in came Ron Johnson, this osteopath, and put me in what I thought was a pseudo-sexual position at the time, no explanation, and adjusted my back, and this loud crack, and all the pain went away. And that was it. I went, I've got to do this. That was the moment. And it was from there on in that these memories of 12 years old, and the cancer that came into my family came back, and I went off with this determination that I must become an osteopath, and something's got to be done about this terrible disease. And it was as naive as that, thinking that there would be some university course or something that will teach you. And as I can expand on the story, but as you well know, the more I studied and as I became an osteopath and the more I researched, the more I realized the opposite was true. And that actually the closer you got to the information, especially the closer you got to speaking about it, the more trouble you got in. So very quickly, by mid-30s, I realized that this game is rigged. And I came across, I think the first book I came across that explained it well was Dirty Medicine. And the author had several attempts on his life. And at that time, it was like, no, this has got to be exaggerated. But when you pull the layers back and you apply the original journalist method of follow the money, we're talking about medicine is well, we'll call it medicine, but the biggest business on the planet by a mile. According to the Fortune 500, they're way ahead of any other company in profits and money generation. And when you ask, if anybody says, "Well, come on," that's just rubbish. You have to just go and ask anybody in any country where you live. In the last 50 years, have you become healthier or sicker as a people? And everybody, and this is pre-COVID, and that's what I call it, and I'm willing to explain why I call it COVID, but pre-COVID, everybody would say, well, we're sicker, much sicker. And if you go back to follow the money, who gains? Mm-hmm. And so what you have to at least start to be open to looking into rather than accepting is that this is not a healthcare system. It's a business model. It's an extremely successful business model, and it's a bloody dirty one too, because they have done everything possible to silence and ruin critics. And any medical doctor that has woken up and come to realize what they're actually in will know what I'm talking about, because they're absolutely professionally crucified till they shut up and toe the line or go off and do something else. And so I don't think it takes that much for people to realize that this is actually a business and not a healthcare system.
And that book, Dirty Medicine, is that Martin Walker who wrote it?
I honestly, it was 30 years ago. Okay. I'd have to go and check, but it was just the beginning of many, many books that started to show me. In fact, most of the best stuff was written 100 years ago, which is about the time that the Rockefellers who were into oil were being basically investigated for a monopoly on the oil. Well, actually, they had a monopoly on the petrol and pumping station. That's where their monopoly was, selling it on once it was refined. And so they decided to diversify into pharmaceutical drugs, which weren't really, abundant then. The doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors and osteopaths and herbalists and homeopaths were sort of level peggings. If anybody was the snake oil salesman, it was the allopaths and the chemists at the time, actually. But Rockefeller employed Flexner and to produce the Flexner report, which basically did a classic hatchet job of saying, well, some of it was true, I must say, but basically a classic hatchet job of we must standardize all education always for the patient's benefit. They love that marketing line. But what they actually did was create a situation with a lot of backhanders and bribes and upfront and behind the scenes to create a situation where only those with enough money could comply with the new regulations to educate people, whether it be chiropractics, osteopathy, or what have you. And so you had to go to them for a handout. And if you took one of their grants, you had to take one of their members onto your board. So it didn't take very long before so-called natural medicine was pretty much eradicated, or it was turned into a poor man's cousin of what it used to be. And so-called modern medicine, allopathic medicine correctly, became the market leader, legally protected, financially funded, and that's how it became and established the world leader all around the world as so-called primary healthcare.
Let's go deeper. Let's unpack this, because not everyone knows about the Flexner report. Not everyone knows about this history. This is the history of modern medicine that we need people to understand, because if you understand the history, you'll understand that we have been manipulated and lied to our entire lives. So what did medicine in America and Britain and Canada, what did medicine look like in these countries, in, let's say, all the Commonwealth countries and in the United States? What did medicine look like before the Flexner report, before allopathic the drug-based medicine, the drugs coming from the petrol industry?
Well, it was a pretty level playing field, and probably you could say true not corporate, but true free market existed. So if you were good at what you did, people got to hear about it. If a medicine was good, people got to hear about it. I mean, you can trace this all the way back even to Dr. Jennifer Daniels' work and the slave medicine, particularly pure gum turpentine. So, today pure gum turpentine is sold as a paint stripper. But back in the day, it was used as a very effective parasitical medicine, and it earned its reputation by being effective, and people going, this works, and they didn't really even need to know why. It just worked, right? I think a best example is if you go to something like the Spanish flu, which to this very day is in every website and history book as a foreign virus that came and killed 50 to 100 million people, which is absolute nonsense, by the way. The actual truth of the matter is that they didn't have the technology, nor do they now either, but they certainly didn't have the technology to find a virus. It's always foreign because that's scary to Western people, some dirty foreign thing. And at the end, World War One had ended early, and so there was a lot of very toxic vaccination vials left, and so the largest marketing pre-COVID or COVID, the largest marketing campaign to scare the world into taking all these going out of date vaccinations, because all their men and women were coming back from dirty foreign countries, and you're going to need to be protected. And it was actually the mass vaccination that started all these differing symptoms of very serious illness. And the allopaths of the time were treating them with aspirin and arsenic based medications, which then put them into sepsis or suppressed their organs of detoxification. And that's what killed 50 to 100 million people. The homeopaths had about a 0.1% fatality using homeopathy. So they were actually extremely popular and a true free market as people started to see the way. But this, as you will see, history has recorded that a flu virus came, this invisible thing, and that was the cause, and it couldn't be further from the truth.
This reminds me of when we look at polio, and that children I apologize for not knowing the exact dates, is 50s. I think
so.
The children were being doused and showered in DDT.
Correct.
It was being
They were fogged.
They're fogged, but there's pictures of children dancing with DDT, like be thrown around like flour. They were being doused in it, showered in it. DDT was being dropped from airplanes, and it was horrible. And DDT poisoning mimics the exact same symptoms as polio.
Because it is polio. One of my most famous sayings, and whenever I do podcasts, I'm trying to plant seeds that stay there, is you're not sick, you're toxic, and it's TOX-SICK, and I actually replaced the S with a dollar sign. But, when you start to critically look at things without an agenda of being right or wrong, and especially being open to being wrong, and when you remove the outcome from your investigations, particularly if it's financially beneficial to you, when you remove all those barriers and you look at it, once we started spraying DDT, fogging on these children and people, polio came along. And what it was these incredibly toxic neurological chemicals going into these children. And, you then, I actually like the polio one because it's the one that people with angry countenance attack you over with vaccination science, which is also another joke when they go, well, what about polio? And they show you a graph where the vaccination started and the polio was eradicated. What they don't realize is one of the most common tricks of this very dirty business is once the polio had begun to set in, which was caused primarily by DDT and was eradicated when they stopped using it and sold it to the third world countries instead. But when they stopped using it, polio symptoms started going down. Plus, they ordered the doctors that they had to give 5 other different diagnoses other than polio. So when you look at a graph and it looks like it's radically going down because of the vaccinations, it's because they stopped spraying DDT and they weren't allowed to call it polio unless it reached a very, very strict criteria. So 5 other different diagnoses came in, and Bob's your auntie. Especially in this time, Bob's your auntie. But Bob's your auntie. You've got this beautiful graph to show the world. And shut up, quacks. You're all stupid. And just go and do something more interesting.
I heard another thing about the Spanish flu, and that at the time they were still dialing in aspirin. They had no idea what dose to give people. Now, for those
Correct.
who don't know, aspirin is an extract from willow bark, right? So, and then of course they've done something chemical to it to be able to patent something. I don't know. This is your wheelhouse, not mine. But what I do understand is if you were to take enough willow bark, right, make a tea out of it or a tincture, if you took enough willow bark, there's a constituent naturally in nature. This is why nature medicine is so cool. That if you took too much, it would cause you to purge. You'd start throwing up. You would expel too much willow bark, right? But they figured out how to isolate the thing in willow bark that blocks pain and remove the thing that causes you to throw up if you take too much of it, if you take the toxic amount. They took that out. They took the safeguard, the natural safeguard built in nature. They took that out, and they had no idea how much dose they should give someone. So at the time, they were giving people lethal doses of aspirin, toxic doses of aspirin. I have a client who he had an abscess and his dentist, it was Friday and his dentist couldn't see him till Monday. And he took a whole bottle of aspirin because, he just doesn't read bottles and thinks it's fine. And he had called me and said, I can't see and I can barely hear. I've almost have no hearing. And I'm like, okay, you need to go to the emergency room because, natural medicine is not going to help you at this point. Like you took a whole bottle that is, lethal. And that's when I actually learned about how dangerous it is that you could go into a pharmacy or go into even Costco and buy a bottle of aspirin or a bottle of cough syrup. But if you complete that entire bottle in a weekend, you can die. You can easily die. They sell things over the counter that if someone took the whole bottle or most of the whole bottle, they could die. But back in the Spanish flu, MDs were giving people as much aspirin as they wanted to because they had no idea what the dose was. They were essentially playing with us and using us as guinea pigs. And a lot of the negative outcomes from quote unquote, the Spanish flu, right, were also contributed to the fact that they overdosed people on aspirin. And like you said, that shuts down the emunctory system, shuts down detox pathways. They were using us back then like guinea pigs. Interesting how we can kind of look through history over the last 100 years and see how they have used us, or just over 100 years now, and see how they have used us as guinea pigs in medical experiments.
Yes, well, as I said, if you put yourself in a critical thinking mind and look at the actual evidence, which is pretty well hidden now. You have to use a search engine like Yandex, which is a Russian search engine, to go and even find a lot of the documented stuff now, because corporate Google and Brave and all the rest of them are so controlled. It is perhaps even Time Machine to go and find these documents. But the evidence is overwhelmingly there. And the aspirin, which of course is salicylates, was suppressing their organ of detoxification from the already poison of all these multiple vaccinations that they'd put into these people. And so it was adding injury to insult, and that's what they would die. And very often sepsis, which is where they would turn black and things. But most of the deaths were actually pneumonia, as they suppressed the lungs and fluid built up, and they died from that. But it was all toxic shock. And when you see this, and or you see the evidence where this is absolutely accurate, and then you look at every single modern day history book or medical book that is still spouting the same, you have to ask yourself why. And then when you come back into the, well, follow the money, it becomes very, very evident that I'm not talking about the good people that are trying to be doctors and nurses and don't know what I'm talking about yet, but you have to start realizing that doctors have been deliberately designed to be drug dealers. And those drugs are very, very toxic. I mean, you can't be deficient in aspirin, right? And so, most people, the word medicine is a positive word, right? But if a medicine makes a healthy man sick, it can't make a sick man healthy. So we've got to start sort of once again teaching people, and that's what I do on my membership side at naturallybetterforyou.com. But we got to start teaching people how to think again. I don't want anyone believing me. That's how my mentors taught me. But they taught me how to think. They taught me how to ask better questions, and they taught me where to look. And, after 30 years of looking at, I would imagine, just about every alleged previous pandemic, I can hand on heart tell you it was caused by either chemicals or heavy metals or vaccinations or medical whatever, and then killed off by the intervention, the treatment.
My mother died because of drug-based medicine, and so I know how you feel when you shared with us that your mom's death was accelerated by what we are exposed to, and when we enter our body into the mainstream medical system. You said you might share with us a bit about what happened to your mom.
Yes, well, my parents were, ordinary folk, good folk, hardworking folk, decent folk, and they found it very difficult. They're of the you know what I'm talking about. They're of the generation of trust the doctor, right?
Right.
So they
right.
found it very difficult to embrace anything I had to say because, if what I was saying was correct, why doesn't my doctor know it? That kind of attitude. So I had to learn to have a relationship with them that allowed them to do, obviously, whatever they choose to do, even if I believe it to be wrong or know it to be wrong. And so I watched them, when my mother went, for example, 10, 15 years before she passed, I think it was 20 years actually now, she was diagnosed with osteoporosis, like most, postmenopausal women. They haven't got the right hormones, haven't got the right fats. She bought into the low-fat diet, and so she had weakened bones. And she said, doctors put me on calcium supplements." And I said to her, "Well, if you take those, you'll end up with a calcified heart or valves." And sure enough, 5 years later, she did, and she had to have open heart surgery, which she nearly died, and somehow she pulled through, but it was never again the same. And then she went on a load of drugs. The old favorite statins and heart blood pressure, but they also put her on a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, which you shouldn't put them on for more than 12 weeks. And she was on it for 10 years. So it ripped even more calcium out of her body. But my father, he got, my mother fed him. So he got bought into the low-fat diet. He loved his fat. We grew up with fat, animal fats and things, and he got sold on that myth. And I saw his brain start to deteriorate, and then they put him on statins, and I saw his brain radically deteriorate into diabetes and dementia, and then they put him on those drugs. And then, of course, COVID came along, and my brother, who's a good man, we're estranged from each other for reasons of kind of things I'm talking about now, but he did his duty, what he thought was good, and he made sure that they both got their vaccinations for the COVID, and that's when I saw them radically decline. My mum had a stroke, a massive clot soon after. My father's dementia exponentially increased, or deteriorated, I should say, and then my mother finally had a massive stroke. And as well, I'm sure, Ashley, we are seeing post these vaccinations, which aren't even legally vaccinations, we are seeing more strokes, heart disease, and so-called turbo cancers and other complications than we've ever seen in history.
It is disgusting what they have
it's
done
criminal,
to us.
not disgusting. It's criminal.
It is criminal. When so many people can't see it though. They can't see it because, and you said like trust the doctors. Your parents, were brought up to trust the doctors. I'd like to dive into that. Did you uncover through the last 100 years the PR marketing that they did to brainwash entire generations of people to blindly trust doctors and the pharmaceutical industry?
Well, as I started my research, and dove deep and had several good mentors, including Harry Hawes, a brilliant original osteopath in his 70s, was my first mentor, and then Barbara Wren, a just genius of her time, naturopath, where she was able to show me that we're not dealing with disease, we're dealing with dis-ease. And she explained it in such a clear way of how you accumulate toxicity, and as the body attempts to get rid of it, if it can't, it throws up fevers and it creates an environment where bacteria can be found. And the bacteria is not an infection, it's actually more like a janitor trying to clear it up. So if you start, and this is very simplistic of course at this point, but if you start trying to suppress that and using toxic drugs to take away those symptoms and the body's ability to cleanse, the body will have several attempts at doing that. And finally, it will go, well, I can't do it. I've got to do something with it. I'll dump it over here in a tumor or a cyst, or I'll dump it in the joints and you got arthritis or rheumatoid, or I'll dump it, in this tissue. And so as you go and start to investigate this, and you start to see how doctors and nurses have been trained, and you start taking case histories, and I've taken tens of thousands over 30 years, you come to see without doubt that their dis-ease progressed as they had more and more quote-unquote treatment. And then when you do a case history and show people that, they can start to see that actually it hasn't been good medicine. Now, I want to say, before I go any further, I worked for a few years with a brilliant pharmacist called Graham Atkinson, who woke up to use such terms during COVID, when he was actually a UK government advisor, so very high up in pharmaceuticals in the UK, and as a pharmacist. And he thought the pandemic had truly arrived and that many people were going to die from it. And he was involved in setting up, protocols and a vaccination center. But he was sitting there as a proper data scientist, realizing that what the government, and it's the same around every country, but what the UK government and what the UK television, quote-unquote, media were saying was not playing out in real life in what he was seeing. And as a data scientist, the data wasn't what they were saying. And so he stepped forward to speak about that. And as we know, those kind of people got absolutely professionally crucified, not welcomed and, oh, that's interesting, show me the data, but absolutely crucified professionally. To the extent that he had to leave his profession and was very ill. That's when he came to me and I helped him recover. But from that, we did a lot of work together, and he started writing a book, which unfortunately hasn't finished, and he sort of stepped back for a while because he's had quite a battering, as you can imagine. But he was going to write a book that I was going to write the foreword to, called The Baby in the Bathwater. Now, the baby is what's good about modern medicine and the pharmaceutical industry. And of course, there are some good things. It's a small and beautiful baby, but the bathwater is more like a filthy sewer. There's a lot, and was a lot to let go of. And doctors and nurses, and many of them are wonderful people trying to do wonderful things, have been put into a system that they didn't realize how trapped they were going to become. For example, prior to the HIV and AIDS deception, I'll call it that for the moment, they had quite a lot of autonomy when things came in to look at and get tests and make different decisions and second opinions and that sort of thing. They had quite a lot of autonomy, and old school doctors were still there, and it was pretty good as a whole. But round about that time, so-called evidence-based medicine started to sort of rear its marketing head. And they were trying to create protocols and standardizing and computerizing diagnosis and records. And so what happened is, and this is certainly what's going in modern day, is you have a certain amount, it's test, give a label, a diagnosis. And by the way, diagnosis is made up of 3 words. Di means two, ag means not, and gnosis means to know. So it literally means 2 people not knowing what the hell's going on. But it's very, very advantageous to them, and very, very scary for you, because people write to me from all over the world. My clients are worldwide, and they write to me, what's the cure or remedy for this? And my answer is always the same: knowledge. And the very, very first thing that I'm doing with them is undoing that, what I believe is a very powerful spell, because they say, I have, and then they, fill in the blanks of what disease label or syndrome they've been given. Right? But what's happened is, once you put that label in the system is now coded, and it has protocol. So the doctors are restricted to this protocol or this protocol, and they're very limited. And if they go out of that, they'll lose their license. So they're really becoming autonomons. I can't pronounce that word properly, but they're basically almost, lost their autonomy of making decisions, and they got more and more restricted. And that's the wet dream of the pharmaceutical industry, that you won't even need doctors at some point. And that's what AI and more coding is trying to achieve, that you won't need them. You can go straight to a AI and put in your symptoms and have a blood test or whatever it is, and it pops out this label, and here's the medication. Thank you very much. And that's the trajectory that they want to get to.
And there's two lenses we can look through. And we were raised to look through the lens of allopathic drug-based medicine. We wait to get sick and we go to the doctor on high that's on a pedestal, and he's going to save us. We have this, we've given them a savior complex that every doctor's Jesus Christ, and and the pharmaceutical industry's God, and we are the lowly sinners. And it's a religion that they bow down to. It's complete dogma. And we've bought into it because when we are sick, we are terrified, we are scared. And it is such a relief to think that there's some big hospital or some big clinic that I could go to, that you could go to, and that the saviors will save us, right? Or take our children to it, or take our husband or loved ones to our mom, right? That they're going to save us. So it's a childlike mentality that Absolutely. The adults will save us, right? And we've been raised in this system. Look at Hollywood, all the media that we were raised, all the movies, the TV shows, it glorifies drug-based medicine, that it's our savior, right? And they shine this beautiful light upon drug-based medicine and all the miracles of modern medicine, right? And then they poo-poo. And they've coined alternative medicine. The vast majority of therapies out there that were here before the pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical drug-based medicine is largely derived from petroleum, right? Chemicals. These chemicals Correct. Do not belong in our bodies whatsoever.
Shock
and
horror.
What drugs
But how many people know that most medicines are derived from petroleum?
No, they don't.
They don't.
Right. And so I like that you pointed out there is a baby. Listen, of course, there's a baby. I'd rather you get on some drug that temporarily saves your life, right? That rather than you die. Like, I'd rather you go, obviously you're in a car crash, please go to the ER, don't go to your acupuncturist, right? There's, of course, intelligence to this. When you take a body that has chronic illness to an MD, they don't have the answers for you. They do not, because drugs suppress, manipulate, alter the body. They do not help the body come back into balance. So there's life-saving drug-based medicine, and I appreciate that it exists. And when you take a chronic illness to an MD, it's like you're taking your car to your plumber. And it's just like, the old saying, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that exactly is what an MD has. I looked at the way MDs are trained, because if you look at the last 100 years and you see it's been very methodical how they developed the MD training system.
Yes.
It is almost identical to how they train soldiers.
Yes.
Think about doctors when they go and they have 24-hour shifts. So we've deprived them. And this comes back to like MK Ultra and looking at like how do you brainwash people? How do you train out the old behaviors out of someone and train them with new behaviors and new ways of thinking? They sleep deprive them. They feed them really crappy food. Think about hospital cafeteria food. And there's absolutely no good reason why doctors should, while they're getting trained, work on 24-hour shifts. It is inefficient. Our brain doesn't work optimally. Would you want to be in a hospital bed and a doctor's been awake for 23 hours? Do you really want someone being awake for 23 hours talking to you? I mean, truckers aren't even allowed to drive for 23 hours. They're not allowed to drive for they think something more than 16 hours because they can cause accidents on the highway. Do we really trust an MD who's been awake for 23 hours to be able to take care of us when a trucker would cause a car crash? It is ridiculous. And maybe they get a little nap here and there, but they're not optimal. So it's a completely inefficient, if you think about it from a standpoint of well, doctors are supposed to heal us, and then why do they have this system set up the way it is? It's because that's how they train them and manipulate their brains just like they do with soldiers to get them to become good little soldiers, good little MDs, right? So we look at how they're trained, and then we look at what they're trained in. What are they taught? They are taught, for example, you cannot regrow cartilage. Once you have arthritis, you always will have arthritis. You can't reverse it. Once you have dementia, you can't reverse it. Once you have these issues, you have to go on a drug. You can't reverse it. Over and over and over again. They are taught that once someone is sick, they can't reverse it. They need drugs. They need drugs. They need drugs. They need drugs. And they're taught that diet is just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you eat. Over and over again, I've heard this from doctors. Doesn't matter what you eat. From my clients who are their patients. They go in. I had a client with colitis go into the hospital, and they said, you should eat pizza and milkshakes because you need to gain some weight. They fed him. He's colitis. He has inflammation throughout his entire digestive tract, which is likely caused by his diet, right?
Yes.
And they gave him the very thing, because they wanted to remove half his intestines, right? They gave him the very food that exacerbates the problem, then put him on steroids for the rest of his life. It's ludicrous, but the thing is, this is the education. Now, who designed their education? And that's where we have to crawl back and go. The people who invented these drugs in the first place, the companies that created the drugs, to sell the drugs, were the ones that created the education. Just over 100 years ago. And that's why it's so important, right, you can tell us the exact timeline, but right around, the Flexner Report, that's when it all began.
Correct.
And that they only funded the colleges and the universities. They only funded them. They being
it was an aggressive business model takeover.
Yes.
There's no doubt in my mind or anyone's mind when you look at it. And I mean, just to share something with you, and then I'll, expand on what you just said. I had a very frightened woman, single mother with a 9-year-old, come to me 4 weeks ago that was just been in hospital for 2 weeks with a gallstone and jaundice. Excuse me. And she was going to have her gallbladder removed on the Thursday. It was a Monday. And the exact words from the surgeon were, if you don't have this removed, you'll die. And we went through a case history, and of course they'd put her on completely the wrong diet, no fat and high carbohydrate and high grains, what have you. But anyway, I dispelled the fear, made sense of how she got there, that also she'd harbored a lot of anger. The liver in Chinese medicine is a lot of resentment and holding on to anger, and that's what the Chinese say gallstones are, by the way. And we're 4 weeks in, she's lost 2 stones, and never felt better, never looked better. Now, although I want to work with her a lot longer, she certainly, I asked her the other day, if you hadn't had this episode that you went into hospital where it scared literally nearly to death, would you go and see a doctor today? And the answer is no. I feel fantastic, better than I've ever felt. And we're only 4 weeks in. And so when you get back to what they're taught and how they're taught, and you're absolutely right, they are overwhelmed with study. And it's quite well understood that most medical students are cheating. I understand from Clive DeCarle that the first lecture at Harvard Medical School is 50% of what we're going to teach you is wrong. We just don't know which 50% that is. I believe it is the Lancet, and I'll have to double check my facts on this, but one of the major medical journals, the main editor, I'm pretty sure it is the Lancet, but the main editor 2 years ago said, he's now convinced that 50% of the studies, if not more, are completely false. And so, most doctors and nurses and what have you go in with maybe career more than, vocation, but certainly with honorable intentions to help people, and then before they know it, they're in massive debt, they're under massive pressure. There's a huge social status to becoming a doctor or a nurse, and they very quickly learn, I know because a lot of doctors have spoken to me, that if they start asking the wrong questions, they get very heavily chastised, and you quickly learn, shut up, and do your job and just shut up, otherwise you're out before you even become a quote-unquote doctor or nurse. But the facts are, and you're absolutely right, by the time they actually get into the job, they've been sort of like a soldier, traumatized into a certain behavior. They disassociate with human beings, and they just become patients. Not everyone, but mostly, because they have to see too many of them in a short period of time. And basically, they become drug dealers.
And that having the debt over their head, I mean, once money is involved, people's morals are,
they're compromised.
They're challenged, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're compromised.
Yeah,
of course they are. We've during the COVID era we discovered that on average a local GP was making about £50,000 to £60,000 extra on the vaccination program. Now, how many? That almost doubled their income. Now, my first mentor taught me, the great Harry Hawes. It's a rare man or woman, but it's a rare man that will make the right decision when money's involved for someone else.
Yeah.
So, human nature, I'm not saying they're bad people, but human nature is going to go, thank you very much. And so we've got to and this is what, through my 30 plus years, the horror of discovering how dirty it is and how loaded it is, and the lack of people, although that's changing, many doctors and nurses since COVID, seeing what went on there and the reality of what that really was and what it certainly wasn't, many are starting to see and talk to us. And what we want is we want people to have open conversations. Like I'm internationally known for getting people, for the most part, well. I mean, we don't succeed with every case because sometimes they've just been too damaged, usually by medicine, but mostly we get people well and we teach them how to get well. And what we want is people to come up to us, doctors, nurses, and go, that's interesting. How did you do that? Mm-hmm. And we have a conversation. But they've been, look, I interviewed, she's a great fan of mine, a great advocate of mine, Valerie Warwick. She was a whistleblower, an American whistleblower oncologist nurse of 18 years. I interviewed her about 10 years ago, I think it was now. And she was fresh out of waking up and seeing what modern oncology really was. And she got a lot of heat for becoming a whistleblower for quite some time. Even the FBI were looking for her at the time. But I asked her a question. Why did it take you so long to see what you're actually doing, which is not treating people? You are literally poisoning them to death. And she said, because and I know people that are in, if there's doctors and nurses listening, I know they will relate to this because I've spoken to so many of them. She said, you believe you're in the best of the best. You believe you have the cutting edge, evidence-based science and knowledge. And if there was something outside of that, you would have been told or heard about it. And they're also equally told that anything outside of that is quackery.
Yes.
And so she was really happily an oncology nurse, even though, all these people were passing, and those that appear to survive, I think, survive in spite of the treatment. And usually those that actually do have treatment and survive, they change a lot of things in their life. That's at least what I've found. But she said it was one patient one day, she looked at him and he had all the symptoms of a vitamin C deficiency, and she went up to the nutritionalist, or I think it was, or the dermatologist, one or two, I can't remember now, but she said, isn't that scurvy? And he said, yes. And she said, well, why don't we give him some vitamin C? She said, we're not allowed. That was the first straw. The second straw was when she found out that oncologists make most of their money from prescribing chemo. Mm-hmm. And that was the final straw, because she realized, and it was well known on the oncology wards, when someone wasn't going to make it, like, this person's going to die, right? And they would prescribe more chemo frequently, which makes no sense unless you're looking at it from a financial gain. If you knew, if the whole ward knew, if the family knew, this person ain't going to make it, what you would do is make them more comfortable. You would entertain them, prepare them for their death, and have their family around them and their priest or whatever it is, and just prepare them for this, this rite of passage to the other side that does exist. But they wouldn't. They'd prescribe more chemo. And so that was the second straw that broke her very rapidly, and she saw what she'd been doing. Of course, she had a lot of guilt to process, and she's a wonderful woman, Valerie Warwick.
Actually, I had her on my show, episode 141. This was years ago, and I loved talking to her.
Yes, well, you'll know.
Because that her experience where she actually saw a few people who were sent home to die, and then they came back a few months later totally well, cancer-free, and that's what woke her up, because she's like, wait a second, what did you do? And they're like, oh, we went to Tijuana, or we went to some clinic somewhere else, or they, I did all these different alternative therapies. And she had gone back to her bosses, the chemo doctors, and said, hey, what did they do? They got better. Like, shouldn't we do that? And we're all just, nope, no, we're going to keep burn and poison. And we're not going to, we don't want to know. They're like, la, 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 like putting their hands over their eyes and ears. When they see someone reverse their cancer naturally, they don't want to know about it.
Right.
And, it's wild. I've coached many people to get so healthy they no longer have type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. That's something that I overcame, and that's one of the reasons why I do health coaching, because it's like,
well done.
Thank you. Type 2 diabetes is so easy to reverse naturally. It's so easy to reverse naturally. It really is. And it's so worth investing the effort into doing it for yourself. It's amazing. It actually transforms. When you stabilize your blood sugar, it's not just, okay, I've stabilized my blood sugar. Your inflammation goes away. Your sleep gets better. Your sex gets better. Your mental health gets better. Like emotional health gets better. You wake up, you jump out of bed full of energy. Like your eyesight gets better. Every aspect of your life. And then you've increased your longevity and decreased your chances of heart disease. I mean, it's wild, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've lost count that my clients go back to their doctors. They no longer have type 2 diabetes. They're thrown away the insulin or the metformin or whatever, and they are going back to their doctor for some blood work. And the doctor, who's been, quote unquote, treating their diabetes for many, many years, now sees that their A1C is amazing, like 4.7 or something, just amazing. And every blood marker is wonderful. And when the patient says, do you want to know what I did? I'm not taking any of your drugs anymore. I'm not following your advice anymore. It didn't work for me. Do you want to know what I did? The doctors don't want to know. They do not. They just put their hands over their eyes and ears and say, nope, good day, go away. They don't want to know. They don't want to know. The money motivation, the fact that they're into a system now, they're so deep in a system. How much guilt and shame would have to come up for them if they realize that they've been doing the wrong thing for thousands of patients, if they've been profiting off of keeping their patients sick, the people they actually care about. A lot of doctors like their patients, and they've been keeping them sick because they've been poisoning them because they have the wrong tool, because they themselves have been deceived. Can you imagine how much, humble pie you'd have to eat to be able to come to terms with that? Like, people can't come to terms with that.
We all will meet our maker, and we all have a soul, whether you believe it or not. You're going to find out you do. And it's interesting that oncologists were interviewed apparently, and 90% of them wouldn't take the prescriptions that they give to their oncology patients, and I think that's very, very telling. But I think it's a very positive time, actually, Ashley. I think there is, since COVID, and I probably should define that for people, because there might be someone listening going, but my mum died, or my dad died, or my aunt, or something. And it's almost certainly not from a virus that didn't exist, and that may come as a great shock. But no virus has ever, actually any virus, but certainly no SARS-CoV-2 virus has ever been properly isolated. It's all computer models called in silico, which is shocking to most people when they hear this. And the pandemic, which was driven by false data from a PCR test. And it's not, PCR has never been a test. Kary Mullis, the inventor, Nobel Prize winner, made that very clear, who conveniently died as COVID-19 begun. But he was very clear this is not a test. And if you amplify it, which they cycle it several times, past 25, it becomes science fiction. And everybody, the data that was provided for the media and the authorities on the pandemic was cycled 45 or more times. So it was complete, utter nonsense. And even at 45 cycles, it doesn't show a virus or an infection. It just pings a certain markers, and then that was a positive test, and that got put down as a pandemic, but it wasn't. And that's why I call it. But during that time, at the beginning, many of the doctors and nurses believed wholeheartedly there was a pandemic, even though, strangely enough, the hospitals were almost empty. And this is why you saw all these incredibly well choreographed and practiced dance routines that the doctors and nurses found time to do during the hospital. And this is also what woke up Graham Atkinson, because just the doctors' surgeries and the hospitals and the paramedics were sitting around, twiddling their fingers. It wasn't overloaded, quite the opposite. And actually, I'm jumping ahead here, but that's the beautiful thing about now. The actual data that's coming out, the true data, that's what's actually going to hang these criminals, by their own data and true science. But nonetheless, what it has given at the beginning, I would argue 95% of medical professionals would have probably lynched us for talking how we were talking during then, even though we've been historically proven and timestamped to be correct. But now there is a huge groundswell of doctors and nurses talking, knowing what happened. They've realized. And I know they're listening and watching podcasts similar to this, and the Dr. Jack Cruises and the Dr. Ken Perez and Dr. Chaffes and Saladinos and similar like doctors that have basically stood up and started being true doctors. And I think we're in a very exciting time. I mean, it's said that no army can defeat a thought that's time that's come. And I believe, worldwide, and because of technology like this and this beautiful platform that we can, talk on with each other in different countries, I think the world is very much waking up and coming together and starting to see, that some very nefarious stuff has gone on. And I don't think you can defeat that, because it seems to me enormous energy is being employed to try and quell this, shall we say, red pill revolution, of consciousness, which is why we named the book The Red Pill Revolution. It's a consciousness revolution. People are listening, thinking, and they're starting to take action. Are there a lot of people that are not on this page? Of course there are. Historically, it's always been that way. In traditional revolutions, not that we want a traditional revolution that is violent and forceful, but in traditional revolutions, it's well documented that only 10% of a population stood up and said, we're not having any more of this, and did something. The 70% of the population followed them, outed a regime, and then, went back to following the next regime or the next religion or the next political ideology. But where we're at now, hence the Red Pill Revolution, and we also wrote the Red Pill Food Revolution, which is equally brilliant. Where we're at now is people are around the world getting onto the same page. And I would say, from a numbers point of view, which is always in motion, it is way past 20-30% of the world population have worked out that we've just lived through the greatest crime ever perpetrated against human beings. And I believe very positive things politically and medically and legally and humanitarianly are going to come together.
Right.
I certainly don't believe we're going to build back better. If we are going to build back better, it's going to be without them, the parasites, the criminals, and the liars.
It's a tall order, but I that's why I'm here. I'm here to call them out and to say that, to educate the masses that you don't need to be sick, that suffering is optional, that there are answers for you that have been suppressed, that have been you've been lied to about the quote unquote alternative medicine out there. Those
their words. Not. I hate that term.
I know. I really dislike it. It's
true medicine.
True medicine.
True medical philosophy, because there's a lot of really good people out there practicing allopathically with
Sure.
true medicine, but they're misguided. But that once you have the true philosophy, which is fundamentally your body doesn't know how to work against you. You can prove this, even if you're a complete dumbass. If you cut yourself, your body immediately goes to work to try and stop the bleeding and start knitting together that wound, as it does in nature for animals in the wild. And short of infection, and we can, of course, there's lovely remedies, both pharmaceutical and natural, to deal with that. But short of that, the body is trying to deal with it. It only knows how to protect you. If you look at so-called autoimmune diseases, which don't exist because the body doesn't know how to attack itself, it does attack foreign particles that are in the cells and tissues. But these conditions don't exist in nature. You don't have lions walking around with rheumatoid arthritis. Right? These are man-made diseases, or modern man-made diseases. And when we start with a philosophy, how many people out there have lost people to horrible illnesses? And when I say something like the body doesn't know how to work against you, you wouldn't blame them for going, what? But when you start to look at how poisoned, and we've talked about a few of the things like polio, when you start looking at all the chemicals and poisons that have gone into people, and we've been through a time where people don't even know what food is. We have to define what food is over feed. I mean, we're the only animal on the planet that doesn't know what to eat.
Yep.
So when we take the philosophy, which is really robust, and describe medication or medicine as nurturing, nourishing, and healing, then it's quite easy to start putting together what is true medicine, even pharmaceutical, and what isn't. And what is, you wouldn't study a poor man to get rich. You'd study a healthy man to get healthy, right? And so we've been studying sick and sickness. No wonder we've gone wrong.
Well, that's even with labs. When I talk, there's a difference. The MDs look at lab results differently than a naturopathic physician does, because the MDs are looking for, are you sick enough for me to give you a drug? And
Correct.
There's sort of these normal
And they have
parameters.
to legally, or they get sued.
Right. There's normal parameters they look at. So are you in the normal parameters? But what is the normal? The normal parameters are a consensus of the average American. So the average American is not healthy. If we took all the Americans, I'm just using America because this is where I live. You could say Canada, you could say Great Britain. As long as there's a country that's exposed to feed instead of food, and the American diet and lifestyle and media, then they have the same problems. The Western world is calorie rich and nutrient starving. Yes, our food's anemic. It's anemic. First of all, the farming practices over the last 100 years have made it so that the soil is deplete. We don't have the key nutrients. Now we're eating, if you eat a plant, a lot of times it's hydroponically grown. There's 0 minerals. Our body needs 60 essential minerals. We're not getting the nutrients we need. People don't sit down and eat fruits and vegetables every single day. They're not getting access to wonderful vitamins. And if you ate a conventional apple, for example, because you think, apple a day keeps the doctor away, there's 50, and the average conventionally grown apple has 50 different chemicals on it. 50 different man-made, petroleum-based, garbage, toxic junk that is killing us. It's killing our microbiome in our gut. It's causing cancer. Look at what people die of in the United. Just as example, I keep saying United States. Most of my listeners are in the U.S. anyway.
Yeah.
Turn
Western
around and
world.
look at statistics. 1 in 3 people have cancer. 1 in 3 people have heart disease. 1 in 3 people have diabetes or prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, or obesity. You're looking around 70% of the adult population is on at least one prescription medication. And I'm not even talking about pain. Don't even get me started on pain meds. Our bodies are on fire.
Oh, I want to get you on pain meds.
Okay,
I'm
let's
loving
talk.
listening to you.
Right.
You go, girl.
Our bodies are on fire. We're eating.
Yeah.
Even if you try to eat healthy, if you're going to eat a conventional, like quote unquote conventional, this is just like saying, we have to choose organic, and organic isn't even clean. It's there's like over
it's a marketing term now, organic.
But there are less chemicals sprayed in organic, but there's not zero. You're gonna have to grow your own food or find a biodynamic farm somewhere to try to get the cleanest food you can. Point being, if it comes from a factory, if it comes from a package, if there's a list of ingredients, you're likely killing yourself. Seed oils is one of the worst things to ever be added to the food chain.
Catastrophic are seed oils. And for those listening, I'm sure they do know, commonly marketed as vegetable oils, and they've never come near a vegetable.
Right. Can you imagine? This is my zucchini oil.
Well, let's just do that one quickly in case your audience don't know. But the history of seed oils is, America, even if this is controversial to your current view or understanding, but America was thriving, as were we over here in Europe, on on animal fats and dairy fats, butter and lard and tallow, or beef dripping, as some people know it. McDonald's cooked in beef dripping, and KFC or Kentucky Fried Chicken cooked in tallow. And then the sugar industry heavily, because they were starting to get some flack because they are a major culprit in causing so much problem, paid a lot of money for the lipid hypothesis. I'm jumping around a bit in timelines here, but the lipid hypothesis and Ansel Keys, that saturated fat caused heart disease and high cholesterol caused heart disease, which is absolute nonsense. And Ansel Keys then went off to live in the Mediterranean, eating an almost carnivore diet, and died just over 100 years old. But what happened was Procter and Gamble got hold of the rights to take cottonseed oil and turn it into what they call Crisco. Now, prior to that, cottonseed oil was a byproduct of, obviously, cottonseed manufacturing and processing, and the animals wouldn't eat it, so they were making lamps and soaps from it. But as that industry changed, they weren't making much money. So Procter and Gamble took it, hydrogenated it, and made it look like lard and called it Crisco. I would imagine everyone in America has heard of Crisco. And then they did another magic marketing trick where they produced a color cookery book, a recipe book, and gave it away for free. Well, that was unheard of in those times. And every food that the traditional American housewife was making with tallow or tallow, beef dripping, or lard was replaced with Crisco, and it was modern and it was clean, and it was portrayed that Granny, was a bit old-fashioned, and this is the new way. And slowly but surely, they moved away from those fats into this absolute poison. That's and we saw this massive skyrocket in heart disease and cancers and autoimmunes, and the seed oils. If I had to take one thing out right now, it would be seed oil. Over sugar. I mean, you can. Sugar's not great, but don't get me wrong. It is a major contributor by the massive increase in consumption in 100 years. It's ridiculous.
It's in everything.
The consumption. Yeah, it's in everything. And the consumption is just huge. But the seed oils have got to take a huge responsibility for the decline in Western health and the profits of the petroleum pharmaceutical, monopoly.
But what about cholesterol? It's bad for you. We can't have cholesterol. We should all have low cholesterol.
Yeah. Well, I know by your tone, that's not true. But but this is, again, I mean, what Ansel Keys did, and he was paid to do it. And again, we don't have science. We have scientism for the most part going on. BS science, bad science is what it is. Well, it's the new religion.
Right.
I mean, during COVID, it was trust the science. Well, that's an oxymoron. The very nature of science is challenge the science.
Right.
And come up with something better if you can disprove it. But so to say trust the science shows we've moved into a religion.
Trust the science is what the bullies said. It is a bully tactic they're saying, shut up, get in line, take our shots, eat our food, do what we say. Don't be a tall poppy. Don't step out of line, or else we will cancel you so publicly and so hard. So trust the science was a threat from bullies.
Well, hence my mother raising me right. But, naturally better for you and the whole naturally better ethos is ask questions. Do not trust what I'm saying.
Right.
How healthy is that? But anyway, back to Ansel Keys, as you well know, he cherry-picked data to produce a graph with some sort of lineal line, which he used to show that countries that ate fats. He didn't even define the fats, by the way, from seed oils to vegetable oils or olive oil to animal oils. He just cherry-picked it, came up with a look here's the proof. And the lipid hypothesis and saturated fat and cholesterol causes heart disease was born. And he, as I said, he went off and ate practically a carnivore diet and lived to over 100 in the Mediterranean. If you put his data back in that he took out, there's no correlation, there's no evidence, there never has been. And they actually picked, and this is you got to love these people are many things, but stupid is not one of them. They literally plucked a number for cholesterol out the air and said, if your number's this, you need to go on cholesterol lowering drugs, which is one of the biggest selling drugs and profits of all time.
Well, actually,
and every 5 years they lower that number, so they increase their market share.
Exactly. So the number, and I've heard the interview from the scientists who had to come up with this number. They said, we needed enough of the population in the United States to be on statins to see if we could make a difference. So we looked at the average, like how many Americans do we have to, so they looked at the average cholesterol levels and they said, okay, if we say it's 200, then we get this many millions of people on this drug.
That's right.
And just to back up,
it's a great spreadsheet.
Cholesterol is so important that every cell in your body that has a nucleus makes it. Even if you were on the potato diet, even if you're a raw vegan and you're not eating any animal sources of cholesterol, and of course, don't touch any, oil with a 10-foot pole, right? But like if you didn't eat only ate maybe, let us say walnuts or something, your body will make cholesterol. Not only does your liver produce it, because everyone thought it was just the liver, it's every cell in your body that has a nucleus. It is needed for your brain. 70% of the white matter of your brain is cholesterol. The myelin sheath that protects your nerves is made of cholesterol. Every cell wall, 7.2 trillion cells in your body. Every cell wall is made of cholesterol. Sex hormones and stress hormones are made of cholesterol. Bile is made of cholesterol. It is
let me just jump.
nutrient.
Let me jump in there actually, because you said something really critical that I don't want to be missed because you're so knowledgeable and passionate. I love it. But just take the sex hormones. Sex is a big thing to people, right? If you don't have enough cholesterol coming in, you can't go through the hormonal pathways to get over to making the sex hormones in the first place.
Yeah.
And so all these problems that have manifested in the Western world, from infertility to not knowing even what bloody gender you are right now, can be connected to the lack of cholesterol and saturated fat and these hormonal pathways being interrupted. And so when you put those back in, quite profound things can happen to people. If you don't put them back in, the body will take the cholesterol from you. So 60, 70 years ago, dementia, Parkinson's, these sort of things, which are really type 3 diabetes and a lack of having cholesterol in the body will take it from your brain. And that's why we see all this dementia and this neurological decline as you get older. It's starving for cholesterol. When you injure yourself, and the body is injuring itself constantly, the first emergency response is cholesterol. I know you know this analogy, but some people may not have heard it. It's like seeing houses on fire, and there's always firemen there putting it out and making the assumption or the association that the firemen are the problem. Get rid of the firemen, no more house fires. It's the opposite. And I know you know this.
Yes.
And when again, back to the philosophy and simple critical thinking, if you apply that without a financial tag to the end result and only a benevolent tag to the result, you've opened yourself up to being a real human being again. See, doctor, the word doctor originally means teacher. We were
Yes.
supposed to teach humans where they've gone wrong and correct it. And that's what we've got to get back to. And that's why we're called Naturally Better, by the way. We've literally got to go back to a naturally better future. We've got to go back to go forward.
So naturallybetterforyou.com is the membership. I definitely want to talk about that because I want my listeners to keep learning from you. You are docere, the doctor meaning teacher. And I love that you brought that up. That is the original root word. Docere means that you go to your doctor so you can learn. How much have you learned from your MD? How much have they sat down with you? That's why when I go see my naturopathic physician, it's an hour-long health lecture in a
Correct.
good way. I love it. I'm like absorbing wonderful knowledge from them. I have never seen an MD more than 15 minutes.
Correct.
Probably 5 minutes. They come in. I think it's absurd. I'm a little jaded. They come in holding the prescription pad, staring at the chart, not even looking up from the chart because, the nurse weighed me and took my blood pressure and they're looking at the labs, looking at the chart, holding their prescription pad in one hand and asking me if I want a drug today. Like that was my last experience with an MD. I really try to avoid them at all costs. And so your doctor should be your teacher. Be willing to fire your doctor and seek a better one. Don't be like our parents and grandparents who, the silent generation, just trust authority blindly, trust authority, don't shake the boat, don't make waves. I don't want my doctor to not like me. First of all, they work for you. Be willing to walk away from them and find a better one. I abhor the fact that now, because of how certain states have these medical charts that they log in. I know with Washington State, I don't know about other states. I'm in Washington. That now any doctor you go to logs in and sees my chart and can see all like what the other doctors say about you. And, they might say that you're difficult because you ask questions. You're not
How
even
dare you.
hurting them, but like you're not challenging them. But these are almost like bully tactics, right? It's like you ask questions and now you're a difficult patient, right? So this is kind of follow you. So seek out holistic doctors, and this is my biggest set of advice when you're doing a little head hunting for your team of holistic health practitioners that are going to support your body's ability to heal itself. You want to ask some questions like, do you believe my body can heal itself? Have you helped other people get so healthy they get off these drugs if you're on drugs, right? Do you, what is your philosophy of healing, right? And you want to ask them questions and listen and hear, are they coming from this reductionistic way where we have to, first I have to look at your liver and we have to see how that, then we have to look at this lab and then we have to look at this, like they're putting you under a microscope and they're not looking at you as a whole. And if your doctor doesn't ask you what you eat, go find another doctor because what you put in your mouth, it's just ludicrous. Let's say
It's absolutely criminal.
Right. You put, let's say, I don't know, you put 6 cups of food in your mouth a day, right? 6 to 8 cups of food. Let's say just measuring a certain volume. And they think that has nothing to do with your health. But a tiny, tiny little pill the size of a pea, that's the fix, right? So something this tiny is going to, fix everything. But all the stuff you're putting in your body, you're shoving in your face hole, that has nothing to do with your health. So if you don't see a doctor that is concerned about what you eat and wants to help you, get your body to the point where it is really healing itself, right? So supporting the body's ability to heal itself, getting out of its own way, stop throwing fuel on the fire, to continue the analogy of the fire, the body's on fire, help those firemen inside you and give it what it needs, and then stop doing what it hurts it, right? Get out of its own way. And the two philosophies, which we've talked about, either you've got the MD drug-based allopathic medical system philosophy, which is you've been reduced to parts that we look at, and we have to wait to get sick and then put you on a drug, or the other philosophy, which is where Dr. Ayres is coming from and what he teaches in his membership, which is naturallybetterforyou.com. In his book, Red Pill Revolution. I'm excited to actually dive into. I haven't read your Red Pill Food Revolution.
The Red Pill Food Revolution. I think it's and I would say this, of course, but I honestly believe it's the best book ever written on food, the history of food, how we got here, and the important crossroads we're at.
I'm very excited to read it. I definitely want to read it. The other the other lens that doctors look through, right, which is what we've talked about, is your body as a whole. Everything affects your body, how you sleep, how you move, the people around you, the things you put in your mouth. Like every aspect of your life is your health. That's what's true health. That's why the podcast is called Learn True Health. It's mental, spiritual, emotional, physical. It's energetic. It's everything. And a holistic doctor looks at every aspect of your life and helps your body come back into balance. A holistic doctor believes your body can heal itself.
Because it's the truth. And I rather use the term a true doctor. Their job is to get rid of you in the nicest possible way, of course. You know, I love the old Chinese philosophy of you pay your doctor to keep you well and you stop paying them when you're sick. Now, if we applied that philosophy to America, Canada, and the UK tomorrow,
oh my gosh,
watch them change.
Right. My mentor, Dr. Joel Wallach, he was raised on a farm, beef farm, and he saw that his dad would feed these calf pellets, would feed them this supercharged nutrition, vitamins, minerals.
Yep.
And he looked at the ingredients, and he actually would put the calf pellets in his pockets and munch on them because he saw and he observed, very, very intelligent. This man is so intelligent. He said, we keep the animals so healthy they don't get sick to lower the costs of the hamburger, of your steak, right? If we took the agricultural, if we took agriculture and we applied the approach to medicine that we use on our own bodies, your steak would be $3,000 because you'd have to wait. You don't give the cow any nutrients, just, give it junk. Wait for it to get sick, and then give it a bunch of drugs and treat it with allopathic drug-based medicine. That would be incredibly expensive. Now, I'm not saying the farming industry is perfect. There's many, many, many unhealthy things by many means. But back then, 70 years ago, he's in his 80s. I think he's 85 or 86. 70 years ago, what he saw was that there's two systems of medicine. There's keeping costs down by keeping the animals healthy to avoid the doctor. And there's the human medical system, which is keeping profits high by keeping people sick and keep them away from being healthy. Two very, very different systems. And so that influenced him growing up and becoming the naturopathic physician and vet and researcher that he is. And he saved my life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this, because, and I've interviewed him twice on the show, because I was sick and suffering under the care of the drug-based medical system, as many people are, and I was able to escape. Pavlov's, allegory of the cave. Yeah. I escaped, and I'm coming back in the cave to try to help people. And I know I've probably upset some people because they still want to stay in the cave. Dr. Ayres, I'm sure you have people upset at you all the time, and I so appreciate that you're willing to run back in the cave with me and help wake people up. Tell us about naturallybetterforyou.com and your membership.
Yeah, I will do work because, at the membership, we've got over 1,200 people from all over the world, and the word community is spoken about all the time, but when I started the membership 2 years ago, because I normally do one-to-one consultations and packages that way, I thought I was going to unleash a mental asylum, because when you work with someone, there's layers of trauma and toxicity that move. There's a lot to take them through. And I thought if I do this with en masse, I'm going to have a mental asylum unleashed. The opposite has happened. It's just fantastic community in the membership site and on our forum, which is where they can actually speak and video speak with each other as well, has been formed. And I work with someone called Graham Norbury, who is commonly known as Norbs, who's a Jack Kruse specialist, deciphering the Jack Kruse work with EMFs and light and circadian rhythms. And basically, I've put together 30 years of my work into what is called the protocol that they follow on a 90-day challenge. And Graham and I have produced over 60 vlogs where we go walking in the beautiful Lake District, one of the most beautiful parts of England. And for 30 minutes, we talk on differing, like we've done today with you and I, but for 30 minutes on different subjects, but while walking. And it's become known as these epic vlogs. They're very entertaining, they're very interesting, and they're very helpful to people, as well as live Q&As every other week, and a host of other things that we also do in there, and other function. So it's just a beautiful place where we can privately teach what I can't always teach publicly, and we're just seeing immense healing worldwide. And as you know, because you've experienced it yourself with your own journey, it's profoundly life changing.
I'm so excited. What what kind of results can you share? Any testimonials, or what kind of results do people see learning and following you in your membership?
Yeah, well, there is testimonials. Naturallybetterforyou.com is sort of a landing page for podcasts because people can remember it. Most of my testimonials are on jeremyayres.com, which is also where you can join the membership. But I've got 30 years of testimonials, and you name it, it's been healed. I suppose most of the people coming into the membership have got chronic disease, named conditions, autoimmunes, weight problems, type 2 diabetes, all the things that are once you start teaching people that you're not sick, you're toxic, and that food is medicine, and that being outside and light is medicine, and that trauma gets trapped in the body, and that's why you've manifested. Once you start teaching them these things and they start applying it and following it, we just see miracles over and over again, because as I say, and as I was taught, and as I teach here, your body doesn't know how to work against you, and anything that it's manifested and with a scary label is still it trying to protect you.
Mm-hmm. I know we're wrapping up, and I'm definitely gonna make sure all the links to everything that you shared is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. I want to make sure that you explain, we touched on, but didn't really follow up with the explanation of that the COVID virus, which has never been isolated,
Correct.
Neither has any other virus out there has been isolated.
All true.
If we don't know that it's a virus, what was it that people had? Now, I had, quote unquote COVID a few times in the last 4 years, which I treated naturally, very successfully with the exact things that were being banned. And I had great outcomes. But I know many people, had the sore throat, cough, fever, hard breathing, sudden plummets in blood pressure and in oxygen saturation. So what were we experiencing if it wasn't that?
Well, first of all, there was actually so many varied symptoms and conditions in the beginning when the media started to explain it. Same thing that happened in the Spanish flu. There was just so many different types of manifestation. Mm-hmm. I would suggest to you that the ones that actually had breathing problems because the oxygen wasn't getting to the right place was caused by metals, mainly graphene, which are arguably being sprayed in the air, getting in, and then the amplification of either 4G or 5G networks. The hot spots of people getting sick initially were where 4G, and there's another one, I think it's called 3C, I can't remember, which is a very horrid frequency that is transmitted from these towers, but certainly 5G. And what it did was cause the hemoglobin molecule to not fully form, and so it wasn't carrying the oxygen properly. And this is why hydroxychloroquine worked in many cases, sometimes within minutes for people, because hydroxychloroquine, which isn't an antiviral drug, which is why you had professors of virology going on the television and saying to people, this can't be a proper medicine because it's not an antiviral, because it wasn't viral. What the hydroxychloroquine was doing when the hemoglobin was damaged by electrical EMF frequencies, it was repairing that hemoglobin molecule so the oxygen could be carried again. Now, if you didn't get that kind of medication and it was that problem, they then ventilated you, intubated you, and under the pressure of the oxygen, they damaged the lungs and they upped the oxygen further until the lungs basically were destroyed. And that's where you had a lot of the deaths. On average, 13 to 15 days. If you were on a ventilator, you died. but you were labeled COVID-19. If you had terminal cancer and died and had a PCR test at your death, you were labeled COVID-19 death. If you were in a car accident and died and had a positive PCR test for COVID-19, you went on the books as a COVID-19 death. So many crimes of data have been deliberately and knowingly perpetrated, at least by a certain fraction of the people, certainly the politicians as well, that we have to now undo all of those lies and all of those poor people that lost loved ones, under circumstances like every other pandemic that we've witnessed, that probably could have been prevented. And if they were already terminal or had comorbidities that were going to end their life, they certainly didn't die from a virus that's only ever been found in a computer.
Episode 445, The Invisible Rainbow, that interview I did
brilliant.
talks about how every single major sickness that has been either an epidemic, pandemic, or even localized major illnesses, like that of Manhattan, the day they switched over from analog to digital back in, I think it was
Correct.
the late 90s or early 2000s, right around there. The island of Manhattan, the entire island experienced sickness, and many people had several serious like migraines, dizziness, pain, flu-like symptoms. But he actually goes back and shares in his book. It's fascinating. The book is
a brilliant book.
Super. Like I could not put that book down. It was, and you'll gain some muscle carrying it around. I think it's something like 4 pounds, but the book, it's such a good book.
It's a historical book because it has shown every development, and we didn't touch it today, but I'm glad you bring it up. Every development of modern illness, and certainly pandemics, has been linked to an upgrade, shall we call it, in technology.
Mm-hmm. Wild. Of course, I mean, every cell in our body is affected by frequency.
Yeah.
I know why wouldn't our cells be affected by radio waves and microwaves and cell phone towers? Why wouldn't we be? Every cell in our body requires it's an electrical. We have an electrical system in our body, and we're mostly water, and water carries the signal. So it's very ignorant to think that our bodies wouldn't be affected. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'd love to have you back if you want to kind of go down a rabbit hole of any of these topics. We could dive in deeper. I'd really love to have you back on the show.
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for sorting out the technological problems that we endured. And I'd love to come back, Ashley. You're clearly passionate and you're clearly knowledgeable. And thank you for all the work you've done.
Absolutely. Please go and check out naturallybetterforyou.com. Of course, I'm going to make sure all those links are in the show notes of today's podcast at learntohealth.com. And there was something, though, you did have an audience giveaway, which is probably on that website, the Anti-Dependency Guide and Post-Vaccination Detox Protocol.
Yes.
Just want to say that again, Anti-Dependency Guide and Post-Vaccination Detox Protocol. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and said, how do I detox from this? And my answer has been time machine, because I don't know how to help you once you have become a GMO. Like I feel so bad for the people who regret what they did in the last 3 years. But you have a post-vaccination detox protocol that you're giving away to listeners. How do they access that?
Well, if you go to naturallybetterforyou.com, the downloads for those documents are there. And I may update it in the near future as we become even clearer. What I wrote is correct on the causes and what was causing these terrible problems. But, we have a task ahead of us.
Yes. And for listeners who found certain things that we said interesting or off-putting, and they want to know sources. They want to know, give me some proof. Give me the sauce. Point me in the direction. I invite you to reach out to Dr. Ayres. He's been a doctor for many years, and he could definitely point you in the direction of of the evidence, right? We question. Science is to challenge and question and then look at the evidence with, without having your own belief system in the way. Put the belief system to the side. Come at it with an open mind, willing to let your belief system be challenged. If you're not willing to let your belief system be challenged, then that's dogma. That's a religion. That's not science, right? So be willing to look at new evidence. And I wish we approach politics the same way. Can we all just like stop saying like all one party is good, all one party is bad? It's like the world doesn't exist like that. The world's made up of people with good intentions and people with nefarious intentions. And I wish that we would hold politicians to the same, to the fire, right? Just don't trust them just because they're in your party. That's ludicrous.
I honestly think that time's coming. I'm actually writing a book at the moment called Make America Healthy Again. And, if anyone is out there unwell, you can contact me on any of those websites for a Zoom consultation. And, Ashley, you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back on the show. Please, everyone, check out naturallybetterforyou.com. And hey, when you reach out to Dr. Ayres, make sure you mention that you're one of my listeners, because he'll know that you're a good one.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Are you tired of guessing your way through supplements? Feeling like each choice is just another shot in the dark? Unlock your health potential at takeyoursupplements.com. Here, we don't just sell supplements, we customize wellness. Connect with a true health coach who tailors your nutritional path based on your unique health goals and challenges. From fatigue to vitality, from confusion to clarity. Start your transformation today. Visit takeyoursupplements.com and discover how feeling amazing is just one free consultation away. That's takeyoursupplements.com.